Do you remember anything about the riots of '68, by any chance?
Here?
Yeah,
Um,
you're a little young.
I was here. I was, going on 9 years old.
I was on the edge of Grant Park that night. I was scared to death.
Yeah, I was young, and yes, I do remember them, and it was a very, very bad time because I didn't live very far from Market Park.
The riots of 68 in many ways changed my life. I was a 16-year-old going to the Latin School of Chicago.
Yes, I remember the riots of '68.
I remember that it was extremely rough. It was a time when we stayed in the house.
But I remember distinctly the night of the Great Riot right in front of the Hilton on Michigan Avenue.
You were at Grand Park?
I was on the edge of the park. I was scared to death. I could not go in any further.
Were you protesting?
I was curious.
I just remember there was so much turmoil out there in the world that was kind of frightening.
And I'm standing there with kind of shaggy hair, never got really long. My father's old Marine Corps jacket, he had been in the Marine Corps in World War II, and standing behind the police line and looking out at all of these people who looked, just a little bit older than I am, but we all looked the same. And I felt a real kinship to them.
And you knew that there were things taking place and that it was bad.
I saw a lot of people out of control. I just saw, anytime you see large groups of people and there's action and movement, you can, and in me there was fear. Because you didn't know what was going to happen. It just did not look pretty.
All the turbulence was out there, but my home was fine.
People later on, Governor Walker's commission said there was a police riot. Well, I'd like to think also that there was a people riot.
I wasn't a political activist in those days. I was a 16-year-old kid going to high school and loved to play football and fall in love with unattainable girls.
It was not, as I look back, I'm sorry that I was exposed to it in the way that I was exposed to it.
Did the police overreact? Yeah, but what would you do if your father was on that police line and they're coming at you and throwing literally crap at you?
It was fascinating to watch, scary to watch, but I didn't live it.
I wish I had a different perspective on it, that I was taught a different perspective. I didn't get that perspective until I was much older because of where I lived, because of the culture at the time.
Just seeing them getting beaten up by police, really, it didn't radicalize me, but it certainly made me more aware of the world in which I was living. It was a moment I'll never forget.
I think we've learned and we've taught police after that how to contain crowds, but they had no training prior to that.
I went down to the amphitheater with one of the reporters and saw that scene. In many ways, it probably inspired me to become a reporter. I'm not sure. I did a lot of writing as a kid, but I think never with the intention of being a reporter, but being in the middle of it, and not in any profound way, just being physically in the middle of it, I think really kind of changed the course of my life, if you can think that could happen in one night.
What do you consider the role of the church to be in the city?
The role of the churches, and God knows there's 1,000 of them. To me, churches have always been, first of all, they're symbols of hope. Old St. Patrick's Church, where I first met your parents many, many years ago, is the oldest public building left standing in the city of Chicago. And it was built by immigrants who had nothing. And if you have nothing, you place all of your belief in the future. It can be good. Life can be good. And so I think that's where they put them in God's hands. That's their higher power. And they built monuments, for lack of a better word, to a better life that they really believed in, that their faith told them that they were not just the scum of the earth. They weren't just poverty, they were somebody. And they had a faith that they could feed off of that.
My religion was very tough on me, especially as a gay man. I was an abomination. I was unsavable. I was the worst. I didn't appreciate that. That was hard to get over. But I think the values of how to treat people, the golden rule, I've lived it. I've lived my Christian values, I guess. I just didn't ascribe them to Christ.
And you believe that that role of religion holds true today still?
We're packed on Sunday, something's happening. All you got to do is take the testament of ordinary people. I think people today, my thesis, because I work with people, I work with young adult Catholics, those in their 20s and 30s, both married and single. Everybody says today, if you study them, whether it's by secular sociology or religious sociology, there's almost universal agreement that they are a spiritually hungry generation of people. And people say, well, why is that? Well, everything that they've been taught to believe in has crumbled around them. 35% unemployment rate for college graduates. So the old thing, your mom and dad would graduate from college or graduate school, your mother went on to med school, they were almost guaranteed a job. Guaranteed. That's not around anymore. How many people your age are seeing their 50-something parents getting laid off? It's just, in many ways it's saying, is there something I can hold on to of everlasting value that's not going to break my heart? And I think that's the spiritual hunger. I really do. Mrs. Daly's funeral was 2 weeks ago this morning here at Old St. Patrick's Church.
And did you attend?
I was on the altar for it, yes.
I actually read your obituary on Maggie Daly. It was
Oh.
excellent.
Thanks.
Did you attend the funeral?
I did not. I went down there for a little while. I did not formally attend the funeral as a reporter. I went down because I had remembered going down to the wake for Richard J. Daly on a freezing December day in 1976 in Bridgeport. Remembered Mrs. Daly, little tiny Sis Daly, shaking the hand of every single person who walked in that church, which is what Rich did at the Cultural Center the day before the funeral when they had Maggie's public wake. He stayed all day, noon to 8, shaking the hand of every single person. That's the Dalys. That's the good Dalys.
When Mrs. Daly died on Thanksgiving evening, what I found interesting is this is a city of an awful lot of political skeptics, a lot of journalists who are crusty. There was almost a universal outpouring of love and concern for Mrs. Daly. And so consequently, the funeral that was celebrated here at St. Pat's was probably the closest Chicago would get to a state funeral.
Complex, my thoughts about the Dalys are. I think that both Richard J. and his son Richard M. really did love Chicago. Richard J. came from a place and an era where strangers were to be feared. Richard J. is the man who was responsible for building what I ever would consider these horrifying high-rise ghettos around the city, with the patina of making it seem as if this was a better life, because places where people lived before the high-rises were pretty lousy. But I don't think he intentioned them to be ghettos, but he did really create these high-rise ghettos that segregated and disenfranchised blacks and made the city this kind of, among the most segregated northern cities in the world. And I think he did it out of fearfulness. Was he a racist? I don't know. His son, Richard M., was responsible for tearing them down because after 30 years you realize the mistakes. I think they were both very, very complicated people. But at heart, I think they had in their minds the notion that they wanted to make Chicago a better place.
Then in comes Richie Daly. And I got to hand it to the guy. All that went away. And for the 20 years he was mayor, we kind of had a unified city. We didn't have these racial wars. We didn't have a lunatic. We didn't have a boring Bolandic. And the city did pretty well. It was good times. Those are the Clinton years and stuff. So, but you have to give a lot of credit to him. Richie was able to keep all of the elements in the Democratic coalition, all of the races and genders and colors or whatever you want to say, and including gays. he kept us all happy. He was good to the gay community.